headquarters of Talasio English in Quito, Ecuador. This is From the South, and I am Sonia Gray. The United Nations and the African Union have condemned the thwarted coup attempt in Gabon, which took place on Monday. A government spokesperson said that soldiers entered the national radio station in the capital at around 4 a.m. local time to announce the establishment of a National Council of the Restoration. Security forces later stormed the radio station in Libreville, reportedly making arrests and freeing journalists and technicians who had been forced to help the rebels make their broadcast. All this happened as President Ali Bongo is in Morocco, recovering from a stroke he suffered in October. Now, Gabon is rich in oil and other natural resources, and international companies have been deeply involved in the country for decades. So to talk more about this, we're being joined live from Washington, D.C. by the journalist and the author Ken Silverstein. Thank you so much, Ken, for joining us. You have written about the role of international oil traders in starting up corruption in Gabon. Can you explain to us how that has worked?
Okay. I have never been to Gabon, but I've been all over West Africa. I know the situation in Gabon well, and I know the oil industry well. The key thing here is that, we think about corruption as, these, corrupt African states. But of course, we all know that the people paying off the corrupt African officials are corrupt also. And those tend to be Western oil companies, or maybe Chinese, or wherever they're from. So the companies will they don't want their executives to go to jail. So they hire intermediaries, middlemen, fixers, whatever you want to call it. These people, they will have them on retainer as consultants, and they'll claim that they're, offering advice. They will be connected in the country in question, in this case in Gabon, but it could be Nigeria or Equatorial Guinea. They have built up relationships, usually by greasing the wheels and lining the pockets of powerful politicians, including presidents. And they pay bribes on behalf of oil companies, and they gain access to rich oil reserves. And the oil companies get rich, the local politicians get rich, and the people suffer. It's pretty easy, really.
Yeah, it is. Can you give us a picture of the scale of the corruption in countries like Gabon?
It's massive. It's absolutely massive. I recently was in Dubai, and this is funny. I'm not going to go to bat for the monarchy in Dubai. Of course not. The United Arab Emirates. I mean, it's the biggest city. However, it's quite interesting, actually, because I've been to Africa many times, and I always say, if you could just steal 99% instead of 100%, at least there'd be a little bit for your people. Dubai has all sorts of problems. It's a monarchy. It's repressive. But they do spend money on their own people. 85% of them are actually foreign workers, and there have been a lot of abuses. But even so, Dubai, I always think when I go to a place like that, and you do Saudi Arabia, despite all of its vast problems, and I'm a huge critic of both these countries, but they don't steal 99%. In Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, those two countries and a few others, they steal just about everything. And that's why people are poor. There's no excuse for it.
So let's explore why these countries, these West African countries, are stealing 99%. What has been the attitude of France and the other Western governments to the Bongo family's government in Gabon?
It's a disgrace. Look, quickly. Equatorial Guinea, one of the worst places on the planet, worse than Gabon. The Obiang family has been in charge since 1979. ExxonMobil and Chevron and other U.S. companies have major investments there. They have so much influence. This is a tiny little African country. It became the third largest producer of oil in sub-Saharan Africa. Gabon, I think, is fourth. They could make them change if they wanted to, but they don't care. They don't care. They're as dirty as the African politicians who they're paying off. In Gabon, you had French companies. The French treatment of West African people is an international disgrace. The French, I love the way they pretend to be sophisticated and superior. Do you know that for many years, the French governments had pre-signed agreements with African leaders that in the event that they were overthrown, they had in advance letters authorizing the French to intervene to overthrow whoever overthrew them and put them back in power. The Bongos had such a relationship with the French. So who knows what France is up to, but France has run West Africa the way the U.S. has run Latin America. So it's disgusting.
Very strong language there. Ken, based on your expertise in the African continent, well, I guess you focus mainly on West Africa, am I correct?
I've been to Angola, I've been to South Africa, but I've reported on corruption in Angola. I've been to a few other places, but my expertise is West Africa.
On your expertise researching corruption on the African continent, what sort of, this might be a hard question, what sort of solutions do you think need to be had to solve this sort of deep-rooted corruption, especially since it's coming from the highest levels of government and management in these various countries?
Well, look, it's not that complicated. I mean, in Equatorial Guinea or Gabon, if the oil companies simply said, look, we are not going to work with you if you continue to steal and plunder and pillage and repress your own people. Equatorial Guinea is tiny. They could not get away with it if Exxon and the US government didn't allow them. And the same with the French in Gabon. It is a little more complicated in one way, though. And that is that, look, Africa is different than the Middle East and the United States or Mexico or Venezuela or Ecuador or whatever. So you do have, these are tribal societies in some way. I mean, not in some ways, they are tribal societies. And you have a tradition where, what happens, a good president, you're not going to turn countries into mirror images of the United States or France, and you don't want to. They're different. But a good president gives money to like the village leader, and the village leader distributes it to people in a fair and just way. That's the way it should work. So, you cut out the corruption, you say we're not going to tolerate it, but you also allow African societies and countries autonomy, and you let them develop the way they want to develop. I'm not trying to apologize for this. I'm saying you don't let the president steal 99%, it's probably more like 90%, and give 10% to the village guys who also are complicit in the corruption, and let it trickle down to the people. You got to change that too. Both sides have to change. It's not that complicated, though.
I agree. Thank you so much, Ken Silverstein, for chatting with us. We appreciate your insight on this.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Other news now, Venezuela has reached an investment deal with the French company Morel and Prom, aimed at transforming the state oil company PDVSA. In a press conference, President Nicolas Maduro spoke about the deal and how it would benefit Venezuela.
We are still defining the details of the investment. Venezuela needs to know we are working full-time to transform PDVSA. We're looking into financial and technological capacity of this company that is known worldwide and has a lot of experience. Their representatives know that in Venezuela they will find the legal security they need.
And on Monday, the Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez announced that President Miguel Diaz-Canel will lead the Cuban delegation, which will travel to Caracas for the inauguration of Nicolas Maduro on January 10th. On Twitter, the minister reiterated Cuba's support for Venezuela and its legitimately elected government. Bolivia will also be present for the inauguration of President Nicolas Maduro. In an official communique, President Evo Morales and his foreign minister, Diego Pare, confirmed their attendance. Social organizations in Bolivia, along with President Evo Morales, have called for unity in order to maintain the current political process in the country. We explain in this report.
Social organizations have launched campaigns across different regions of the country in support of the re-election of President Evo Morales later this year.
Brothers and sisters, we have to once again defeat the right-wing opposition. That's why we need to be prepared and organized. We need to guarantee an electoral victory for Evo.
The current government, headed by President Evo Morales, has increased our GDP from 9 billion to 40 billion US dollars. After making history like this, the opposition continues to question his administration.
Speaking at a school inauguration in a rural area, President Morales referred to negative comments made by a Brazilian lawmaker against indigenous people.
A Brazilian lawmaker said they will have zero tolerance against indigenous people. He also said that if they want to be indigenous, they should go where Evo Morales lives. Can you imagine that? Here, indigenous people are at the core of our government. It is totally different. It is something historical for us. We should be proud of our historic process.
President Morales highlighted the importance of unity in order to preserve the economic and social programs achieved in the last couple of years.
I want to tell all of you, brothers and sisters, unity will defeat the right-wing opposition. A unified nation will defeat the U.S. empire and the capitalist system. If we are divided, we will be defeated. We will fail.
Bolivia will have primary elections on January 27, so people will choose between the presidential candidates of 9 political parties. Those chosen will then participate in the general elections in October 2019.
In the Brazilian state of Ceará, protests and violence continue, with 5 people now dead. An increasing number of attacks and conflicts have hit the region of the country within the last 5 days, including a bomb explosion near a highway. The new Minister of Justice, Sergio Moro, deployed more than 400 police officers. Close to 150 people have been arrested. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Mayer, has more details.
For the last 6 nights, the northeastern Brazilian state of Ceará has been rocked by dozens of violent acts, including lighting buses on fire, blowing up bombs at bus stations, public buildings being attacked. And as a result, Jair Bolsonaro's federal government has sent in 300 troops from the national security forces to patrol the streets. The problem with this, however, is that the actions that are underway are coordinated from behind bars. Basically, Luis Mauro Albuquerque, who's the newly appointed Secretary of the State Prison System, announced last week that he's going to stop the policy of segregating prisoners according to what drug faction they belong to. Now, the prisoners are upset because they believe this will lead to murders and violence behind bars. And as a result, the 3 largest drug factions in the state pooled their resources together and announced that they're going to create a climate of terror until the government backs off its statements and cancels the policy. So it's hard to understand how putting more police on the streets will solve this situation if it's being commandeered from behind bars. São Paulo, Brian Mir, Telesur.
We thank Brian for that report. The Peruvian Attorney General Pedro Chavarri has tendered his resignation. Chavarri resigned during a meeting of head judges from the Attorney General's office. He had previously announced his resignation via a statement on social media on Monday night. Outside the building, while the meeting was taking place, people gathered to demand a state of emergency be declared at the Attorney General's office. And 4 people have died in Peru because of an avalanche in the Andes Mountains. The victims were 3 Spanish mountaineers and their Peruvian guide. A 4th Spaniard survived the avalanche and alerted the local police. Authorities said the group was getting ready to start their way down from the top of the Nevada Mateo mountain when an avalanche hit. All 3 bodies have been recovered. Federal police in Chile have raided several Mapuche homes in the country's southern region, arresting 6 residents. Our correspondent in Santiago, Thierry Valenzuela, has those details.
The murder of young Mapuche Camilo Catrillanca on November 14th has worsened the country's political crisis. In the last couple of days, there were more forced evictions in different Mapuche territories. Some 70 carabineros and federal police investigators raided several homes in Eracilla, located in Chile's Araucanía region. Early on Monday, they arrested 6 residents. Police General Mauro Victorino was questioned by the Attorney General's office about the murder of Catrillanca. He revealed that he talked to Interior Minister Andres Chadwick to inform him that Catrillanca and several Mapuche members were unarmed and there wasn't a confrontation with police forces. However, the Interior Minister said there was a confrontation in order to justify the attack against the Mapuche community. Social organizations have also demanded Interior Minister Andres Chadwick step down, claiming he is directly responsible for Catrillanca's murder. Mapuches in southern Chile have been demanding the return of their native lands stolen by loggers and the government decades ago. The Piñera administration has increased Carabineros' presence and repression against the Mapuche since taking office last March.
We thank Paola Dragnich for that report. Heavily armed Canadian police mobilized against camps in the territory of the Wet'suwet'en. The indigenous community has been engaged in a permanent blockade, trying to prevent a gas pipeline from being built in their territory. Local reports say that up to 13 people have been detained. According to the UN Declaration on Indigenous Peoples' Rights, these communities cannot be forcibly removed from their territories. The locals say the pipeline project is a threat to their plants, animals, and communities in the area. We'll take a short break now. Please stay with us.
The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? We analyze every move on Critical Move. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Guatemala is ending the work of the UN-backed Anti-Corruption Commission in its country 8 months earlier than expected. The International Commission Against Impunity sought to prosecute the president, Jimmy Morales, over illegal financing allegations during his election campaign 2 years earlier. The investigations also targeted members of the president's family. In August, Morales announced he would not renew the body's mandate, which was due to expire September of this year. The Foreign Minister, Sandra Jovel, announced the latest decision after meeting with the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, in New York. The president's decision to end the UN-backed Anti-Corruption Commission has caused a number of reactions. The Guatemalan human rights attorney, Jordan Rodas, said that the agreement with CICIG is based in international law and no president is above the law. The Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, made statements just a short time ago on the Essequibo, in which she said that boats from Guyana, backed by ExxonMobil, were found illegally in Venezuela's waters and not in the disputed region between the two countries. Rodriguez added that Venezuela will be sending a letter to the United Nations about Guyana's incursion and provocation, and showed the recordings of the exchanges between Venezuelan and ExxonMobil boats in which they admitted that they were in the Venezuelan territory and they were there illegally.
This Essequibo territory, I repeat, over which Venezuela has no doubts regarding its ownership, and which was stripped in a barbaric way by the British Empire, has a maritime projection where there is still a dispute to resolve. The incident which took place in the month of December 2018 took place in the legal territory of Venezuela. of indubitable sovereignty where no type of territorial claim nor controversy exists at all. It's an extremely serious act that took place and which was directly provoked by the government of Guyana. They entered in an unprecedented fashion into the territorial waters of Venezuela.
And the Jamaican government is moving full speed ahead with plans to buy Venezuela's stake in the Petrojam oil refinery, allowing it to start delayed plans to boost production. Venezuela's Foreign Affairs Minister Camina Johnson-Smith made the announcement on Twitter. The decision comes nearly 2 years after the partners signed a long-term agreement to spend more than $1 billion to modernize the plant. Venezuela owns 49% of Petrojam through the state-owned PetroVista Caribe, a subsidiary of Petróleos de Venezuela. A day like today in 1959, Fidel Castro entered Havana for the first time after the triumph of the revolution. He also gave his first speech, speaking in front of thousands of Cubans who followed the Freedom Caravan through the main cities of Cuba. Fidel said that this was a decisive moment in the revolution, defeating the tyranny of the dictator Fulgencio Batista that had the country under despair, poverty, diseases, and illiteracy. Fidel finally vowed to transform Cuba. Citizens in the Democratic Republic of Congo continue to wait for their election results over a week after the presidential election was held. The Electoral Commission has not sent a date for the release of the votes, an announcement which has already been postponed once before.
Waiting for the results to be announced adds more pain to our hearts as we wait for the one we voted for at the polls. The satisfaction would be that in return, we would be given back the results obtained after completing the task of voting.
An independent authority representing a republic tells you in 48 hours you will have results. They postpone it for a week. After a week, it is postponed again to 14 days. And then we are told that they are not yet sure of a time frame. At this point, we don't have any more trust.
Right, staying with some news about elections, but this time in Madagascar, the High Court has declared Andry Rajoelina as the presidential election winner. The court confirmed that Rajoelina secured more than 55% of the vote in last month's runoff. His main challenger, Marc Ravalomanana, received just over 44%. Ravalomanana, however, has filed a complaint over the runoff results. He's alleging fraud. Thousands of Ethiopian pilgrims from all over the country have arrived to the churches of the Lalibela Rock Hun to celebrate the Orthodox Christmas. These churches are a World Heritage Site where thousands of people gathered who've traveled up to 3 weeks for the celebration. Orthodox Christians follow the Julian calendar, which celebrates Christmas on January 7th.
The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has a different calendar from the rest of the world. Ethiopia has 13 months in a year, and that's why we celebrate Christmas at this time. We have a different way of counting, which is completely different from Europeans and people from the American continent.
Time now for a short break, but we will have more news in a minute, so stay with us.
An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives, Friday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton met with his Turkish counterpart on Tuesday to discuss the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Syria. Bolton has said that Turkey must guarantee the safety of its Kurdish allies in Syria as a condition for the U.S. to leave Syria. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said his country does not accept this U.S. comment about the Kurds, saying the U.S. conditions are a very serious mistake.
Regarding this matter, Bolton has made a serious mistake, and whoever thinks like this was also made a mistake. It is not possible for us to compromise on this point. Those who are part of the terror corridor in Syria will receive the necessary lesson. There is no single difference between the PKK, YPG, PYD and Daesh.
And the U.S. Secretary of State has arrived in Jordan. He met the Jordanian foreign minister and will also meet with King Abdullah II. During the 7-day trip, the U.S. Secretary of State will also visit Egypt, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar and Kuwait. The North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has arrived in the Chinese capital of Beijing. He is visiting at the invitation of the Chinese President Xi Jinping from January 7th through the 10th. The DPRK leader visited 3 times last year, and his visit may lead to a 4th summit with Xi.
Chairman Kim Jong-un's visit is at the General Secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China and President Xi Jinping's invitation. As everybody knows, this visit is part of high-level exchanges as China and North Korea are friendly neighbors, and this is an important part of our tradition of friendship.
Now let's go to Japan, where the former chairman of the car company Nissan, Carlos Ghosn, has declared his innocence to a Tokyo court. He said that he was wrongly accused of financial misconduct. The presiding judge said that Ghosn was a flight risk and that he may conceal evidence if not kept in detention. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at tellusiaenglish.net. For viewers in Africa, remember, you can find us on StarStat Channel 461 in South Africa and Channel 539 in Nigeria. And join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Sonie Gray. Thank you for watching.